what do you both, I want to ask you both what you see as the most exciting developments or trends within this kind of broad subject of um, digitalization. So, Jim, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I would say the greatest trend that we're seeing that gets us excited, and I think it should get everybody excited, is the advancement in the integration of the larger wind farms with the technologies that are emerging at a rapid pace from some of the advanced research that goes on in all of the laboratories around the world, integrating wind physics with digitalization and machine learning. And so I think that integration is in process, and it is being driven really hard now with the requirements that we have for implementations with offshore in the coming years. Offshore just cannot happen in the way it's currently envisioned without automation, without systems approach, without on-demand solutions, and independent networks.
And what are you doing to move that forward, Jim? Integration.
So we have developed over the past 6 years an advanced simulation capability for wind systems analysis on any wind farm anywhere. And a lot of that's based on existing data, both public and private data. But more than ever, the integration of advanced networks with particularly onshore right now with 5G and the ability to acquire new and additional data, comprehensive additional data, intra-array, machine learning type things using automated systems is a real breakthrough that's in process now. It's not it should not be a surprise to anyone that we and the other company that are making great strides in this, SkySpecs, are both senior sponsors here at this event, because this is happening. It will happen. It's underway. The other thing, though, that I would mention alongside this is the concept of advanced capability around data. What really needs to happen with data is its complete normalization with ontologies in the way that many great companies have been doing, and for a long time, that has been really lacking in this sector, leaving lots of decisions to be made based upon incomplete data or data that's not actually applicable to the solution for which it's being applied. We're driving that very hard, and we've recently announced our partnership with Palantir, which is winning almost every U.S. government contract there is to supply us with exactly that capability. So that's what we're doing.
Fascinating. All right, Daniel, you're up. What about you? What's your prediction for the near? And thank you, Jim, for that. What's your prediction? What are the predictions you would make of the greatest impact on digitalization in the next year?
In the next year, well, I think I'll just answer in the near future, because as we all know in this industry, trends seem to happen so rapidly, and at the same time take forever to actually get implemented. Just the nature of asset management. I think I'll take a different tact to Jim. Jim has given us an excellent answer on the technical side of things, and certainly not my area of expertise. My area of expertise is more on strategy and overall operations management trends. So I will say that I think from where we see at Wood Mackenzie, one of the most exciting things that are happening with the implementation of digital technology is pretty much these following factors. First and foremost, there's a lot of great hope in that digital technology will unlock the next evolution of operations and management practices. Most importantly, moving away from the traditional cost-based view of operations and maintenance, keeping the costs low on an operation basis, towards more of a holistic overall operations improvement. And what I mean by that is one of the great promises with digital technology and what we all hope to see. And I think Jim's group and SkySpec and all the other great technology people are making great strides in this, is that we really don't quite understand as an industry perfectly how cost spend in certain values relates to overall operational performance. It's one of those great unknowns. Having this digital technology ecosystem, having this digital technology architecture will help us understand these things a little bit better and drive us towards, I suppose, this promised land of a sorts to what we call at McKinsey prognostic health maintenance, looking at things in an overall holistic health perspective, trying to get a handle of when things are going to fail before they even fail, and trying to squeeze the maximum operational performance out of an equipment before we would get there. I suppose the other key factor that's worth mentioning. Sorry, go on.
No, that's great. A very specific question about that. How do you measure the impact you've had?
How do we measure the impact you've had? That's a good question. I think a lot of my more technically minded colleagues here will disagree with me. But to be honest, we've spoken to many, many different asset managers, and the answers we get about the promises of digital technology as it stands it's a wide spectrum. We get people who absolutely hate it and will just stick with their operational strengths, and they believe their operational strengths is what keeps their cost base and performance high. Sorry, cost base low and performance base high. And we get asset owners on the other side who swear by it and think it is the next step change in operations and asset management evolution. And it's kind of the needed thing to get there. And measuring that is measuring who's right. And more importantly, I suppose we should say, on a more fundamental question, measuring the cost versus return assessment, which is the most simplest way to think about how do we measure this. And you get all sorts of different varying theories. Some say that return on digital technology ecosystem can be as short as 5 years. Others think that you're just spending money and throwing it all away. But I think most importantly, what I've sort of discerned in my time speaking to the market is that it's a fundamental question of your historical operations data, understanding what your historical performance is. And even in that case, many asset owners don't really have a good handle of their operational data. Many, many different reasons why. Jim and Brian can answer this question better than I can, but I think fundamentally one of the biggest problems that we have is we don't actually understand what is in the operational, understand what it all means. And this is, of course, not a blanket statement to everybody, but commonly this is the refrain I get when I ask people, how do we measure said digital technology improvement?
Yeah. And this is a question to you both. And so, Jim, I'll ask you, do we have the foundation of data that we need to make these kinds of predictions? Like when we go to actual owner-operators, what's the state of data? Do we have the foundation that we need to actually make predictions?
That's a great question, but I'm going to answer the other question first, the one that Daniel was working on.
Okay, sure. Good, that's fine.
We can tell you exactly how to measure the success of digital technology. The first thing is, and it's the most important thing of every customer we're talking to, is are you increasing capacity? People want to know if you're increasing capacity. That can be measured. It can be measured in advance, and then it can be looked at in terms of how the power matches up against additional capacity for power. That's everybody's critical buzzword. They want ancillary tariff revenue. They want to be able to put energy into the grid when the grid is available, and they want to be able to be in a position to work with people on the other end of the pipe with their contracts and financing issues that we all saw rip apart Texas last year. with a more conservative approach based upon additional capacity. So that's the first thing. Second thing I would say is that on the other side of the coin, nobody wants downtime. And so everything that we do and everything that our partners do is premised around the idea that we can do things without having people have to go down in order to accommodate what they need from us. And so that's a critical component of how we measure our success. Now let's talk about the foundation of data and the state of data. So, I mean, SCADA data is in pretty good shape in most instances, but it's not really a full enough set of data to make a lot of the decisions that wind farms are being asked to make. If you think about what it actually ends up being, is measurements at whatever number of points in turbines that you've got, and whatever number of points on each turbine that you're measuring, and most of the time, each of those points on any given turbine involves something different. You might be measuring oscillation in one spot. You might be measuring, the direction and velocity in another spot, and then in a third, you might be measuring air density and things like that. So what we need and what is being delivered by folks that are giving a lot of thought to this is more points. More data points on the wind farm. And there's no reason that a wind farm shouldn't be measuring everything that's happening, at the turbines, in between the turbines, and with respect to wind, we can measure what's coming better now than we ever could before, and take the premises of current weather conditions. Based upon forecast weather conditions and run optimizations to determine, what the history is and how that all works. So the data that exists is foundational, and it's important, and we like to see it. A lot of people, I saw there's a panel on about monetizing your data. The idea that your data is unavailable to others is suggests that others don't know how to do math. I mean, we can get all the power we want from the government, and so we know what your power is, and then we know what the weather is pretty much. We don't know exactly at your turbine level, but simple mathematics and an advanced simulation like ours can often predict pretty much everything that it already says in the data. We like to see it so that we know what is actually accurate. Right. Let me tell you the other thing we like to do, and then I'll turn it back to Daniel. We like to look at historical data, but we like to set a baseline based upon what's going on currently, and what can go on based upon the additional features that we add. And so, an around the clock baseline, meaning around the wind rows. Baseline is really in nirvana, but obviously that takes a full year to understand what's going on there. So what we like to do is identify the opportunities based upon directional and velocity criteria as the guideline, and then advance the premise of capacity for different elements of the wind rows at different times, and then start to pick and choose, opportunities. That's why we built our system to be on demand.
Right.
So.
Cool. Thank you. Daniel, back to you. So let's move to cyber threats. What's your view of, is that a topic that you think about?
Cyber threat, is it?
Cyber threats. So the risk,
cybersecurity.
The risk that the security implications of running large distributed fleets, ransomware and other things. What are you seeing in that?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a question that comes up all the time, every time we speak to asset owners. And I suppose it is one of those potentially emerging threats that have yet to be hit, but we're seeing parallels in our traditional power brothers and sisters that have been hit, and now we all need to get prepared for it. I think fundamentally, in the end, it's just one of those questions on how do we handle those cyber threats. I don't think enough asset owners, this is me personally speaking, I don't think enough asset owners are actually giving much thought to this. We're talking about online cloud-based systems for a lot of this digital technology ecosystems. We're talking about not just remote monitoring, but remote controls, system restarts, fault clearances, all now being done online. And of course, those are multiple points of entries for security threats. And
do you see migration to the cloud, the public cloud, as something that the owner operators should be doing over running their own infrastructure? Out of curiosity.
Well, that is a good question. And again, it all relates down to your security infrastructure needs. I suppose I have to say, me being not a technical expert in kind of data management systems, it is a specific asset owner based question. I know some asset owners in Europe prefer to have their own internal infrastructure and keep separate from the cloud. Others love the ability to have it on the cloud so they can share more information amongst their internal teams. Who knows which one is the right way to go? I think more technically minded people can answer. Jen's smiling, so I'm pretty sure you can answer better than me.
I'll stop asking you. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to open it up next. Thank you so much for that answer, Daniel. And Jim, do you have any thoughts on security, or like, should owner operators transition? Should they be managing their own connections? Should they rely more heavily on the public cloud and companies like Microsoft and Amazon who invest billions of dollars in infrastructure security? What's your opinion?
My opinion is that the very first question we get almost every time we talk to any wind farm relates to cyber threats, and if we don't answer that one well, we don't get a second question. People are concerned about this in every way that you can possibly imagine. I would say that there's no specific answer to your desire to pin it down to what's better. What's better is giving thought to the specific needs that the wind farm has, the location of the wind farm, its ability to access the data that's on the wind farm, and the ability of the wind farm to safely distribute data back for more advanced computations. And there's very well-known ways to do that and avoid anything coming back in through that connection. Every wind farm knows about that. And then, and in fact, and I would say this too: anybody who thinks that every wind farm in America that's being operated by General Electric or Nordex or Siemens Gamesa or anyone else, if you don't think the cloud is involved, then you don't know what you're looking at, because you go in the back room and you'll find a simple web server that is running 24 hours and reporting everything that's happening back to the cloud, back to whoever's managing your wind farm, and many times in multiple locations. And then when your operating team goes home at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, whatever time they leave, somebody is managing that thing from Hamburg or Copenhagen, and those commands are coming in over the public web. And so what I would say around the overall scenario is that there are sophisticated tools that are available to protect from cyber threats. They are the gateway tools to almost every company in the world. Wind farms are no different. And many times we see the biggest threat that a wind farm has as being physical threats, because they've got systems down tower and up tower and in a command center, on the wind farm that are under lock and key. Reminds me of the time I was at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory looking at the NIF system, which is the laser system they have out there, and they were bragging to me about how great the the cyber setup was. And I was, of course, being a network guy, looking around, and I'm looking at the networks, and I look about 5 feet above everybody's height, and there's a box with cable running out of it in either direction, and the box has a lock. And I said to the guy that had me on the tour, I said, "Well, who's got the key to that?" And that's the same situation. Who's got the key? And how are you addressing the physical issues? I think is where you really need to start.
That's a great answer. Thank you. So I'm going to turn it now to Daniel. What's the question that you think you would ask of the audience and of anyone else present? And then I'll ask you to try to, what do you think is the most pressing question in this space of digitalization to you, Daniel?
It's a great question. Simple question then, or simple answer worded in question form is, are you ready for this digitalization? Do you know what it means as an asset owner to be implementing digital infrastructure? Do you understand the impact to your organization, to your operations, not just in terms of technology, but in terms of your work operations? How does it impact the people who all have a stake in your asset management practice? Do you understand the underlying data needs that feeds into this? There's a lot of layers that go into it, but fundamentally, it's just a question: are you ready for this digital technology revolution that is coming? At Wood Mackenzie, we've heard digital technology being bandied around for ages and ages. It's always the talking point that gets people excited. But digital technology over the last few years has been coming through in hop, skip steps, sort of like 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards. But we can sense that underlying kind of next tectonic change in digital technology evolution. It is coming, and it's coming very quickly. We'll be all blindsided by it. Although, of course, people like Jim is at the forefront of this, so he can predict it much faster than I can. But this is the fundamental question that I would ask the audience: is, are you ready for this digital technology revolution?
Okay, and I'll ask you one more, and then I'm going to switch back to Jim. What's your challenge? Do you have a challenge to the audience? So you've asked the question. Can you think of a challenge that you've seen that you would challenge them to think about coming out of this conference?
Yes, I would challenge everybody to be more open to shared data. And this is not, of course, talking about cybersecurity and opening up the gates and letting people in, but more data sharing is needed with all the stakeholders in asset management and operations and maintenance. One of the biggest barriers we see in this space is that, it's an earlier point to Jim talking about monetization of data. I just sometimes I'm a little bit flabbergasted by it, because monetization inherently throws up certain barriers to sharing data. You have to pay for it to get somewhere else. But inevitably, one of the biggest problems that we have, or that I've seen when I speak to people in digital technology, is that not enough people are sharing data with each other to make the digital technology or feed the digital technology with the data that it needs. One great example of that is, I think, on the technology data, the performance data that comes from the OEMs, that is not readily available to asset owners. And the operational data tends to be managed by the OEMs in quite a lot of the older systems. So perhaps a better data flow across all people, or data liberalization, where people have more access to certain, not all of the data, but certain parts of the data needed to drive that challenge, and to drive that next stage of evolution, to feed all the digital technology systems, to allow the smart thinkers at the forefront of this kind of revolution to implement better solutions for all the asset managers. That's the challenge I have. Sorry, go on.
Couldn't agree with you more. Keep going.
Okay. I'll just finish up saying that that's the challenge that we have. And, we've got probably 3 different groups all standing up for each other against against each other in a Mexican standoff. Someone's going to have to blink first, and that's the way to think about it.
Right. That's great. I'll just throw in before we turn it to Jim. I lead the Enter Alliance, and the goal of the Enter Alliance is to standardize data for the purpose of sharing. The U.S. government stepped in and invested in a $500,000 round to build an open source platform for the space to help solve this problem. If you want to learn more, you can go to Enter Alliance. That's ENTRalliance.com. We're also trying to promote collaboration through a platform called Relight, which we launched 6 months ago. You can go to relight.co. Launched 6 months ago in partnership with EDP to solve significantly hard technical challenges that the industry has and bring in a posture of collaboration to the space. And we've had 8 submissions to gearbox failure detection. So couldn't agree with you more. I see the space as needing more collaboration, more data sharing. And those 2 initiatives, Enter Alliance and Relight, have been funded by the US and Swiss governments to try to solve that problem in the space. So thanks for saying that. That's my challenge to everyone too. Jim, what's your question to the audience? What would you ask them? And then what would you challenge them to do?
This is really not fair to Daniel because I keep getting to listen to the questions and then have 5 minutes to come up with my answers. I appreciate you helping me out there, Daniel. I think, by the way, congratulations on the initiatives that you've created, Christian. It's that is a something that is critical to this industry because, after all, we're all in this together to maximize the amount of renewable energy that we can create for the benefit of everyone. And as we know, it's happening, it's benefiting, and the numbers tell us over and again that wind will be at the heart of it. And so everybody doing better is critical to the industry and to all the people. So my question, number one, would be to ask anybody here or anywhere actually, do you know your potential? Have you analyzed what the potential of your wind farm is? There's a lot of things that go into that, and we can talk about that. But my sense is that most wind farms don't really realize their potential. And sometimes when you want to figure out what your potential is, you need to go back and look at decisions that were made in planning to build and then in building that may have impact on that potential. When I'm talking about potential, I'm talking about capacity. And then the challenge, I think, is that I would throw out is for you to know your obstacles to success, to know them really well. And I put that out there specifically and mostly for those that are driving the way toward offshore implementations. Offshore, has so many risks and so many issues that need the community approach in a very, very big way. Need a centralized data approach so people that are doing Dogger Bank and explain what's happening there to those who are building off of Santa Barbara. And and we've got so many different things that are happening there. So I would put those 2 out there as the most important things. And then I would say though that putting your data in the right hands, and I think industry management is a good idea, is an important thing to do. But I remind you again that we can figure out what your data is. So really, that's something that is a great thing, but it's not something that you're going to be able to monetize.
Right. Well, great answer. So the last thing is, because I lead the Enter Alliance, which is a coalition of energy companies that have come together to ask how can we collaborate, and also the Relight platform for connecting people into sort of collaboration across the industry. We've been asked to speak at COP26 about this. And so I'm curious if y'all, and I happen to be meeting with various people from various governments, like while I'm there, what question would you ask, either one of you, what would you put to sort of energy ministers around the world if you're on a stage at COP26?
Well, I'll go first so Daniel can think of his answer.
Okay.
My question would be, I would put it to them, in the most diplomatic way I could, but I would say to each of them, what is it that you're doing to make sure that we succeed? Because if they're not doing something, they don't belong on the platform. And there are things that every country can do, regardless of what their resources are. You've got great initiatives with capital coming out of Denmark, the United States. I understand that there's similar initiatives in China that, are happening. I know India is doing great things there, but there's other things that can be, that can be helpful, and I would really press them on that.
Yeah. Daniel, how would you press energy ministers who come to COP26? What issues do you see them needing to focus on to move the climate issues forward with respect to our sector, wind energy? Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Honestly, I hadn't been thinking much on this because just sticking to the subject of digital technology. But I suppose if I could double dip us a little bit here, there's probably two questions here. All of them can be solved with some kind of digital technology implementation. One is, how are you going to uplift the millions of impoverished people around the world with clean energy? Clean energy independence is necessary and needed. And studies show time and time again, I won't go into the details here, but anyone can look at these kind of studies, that powering impoverished communities is a monumental increase to their economic stability and health. So those kind of things, since we're talking about impoverished communities, quite often that's talking about distributed generation technology. And distributed generation technology probably works best with digital technology systems in the end, just to tie it back to the subject matter at hand. But that would be one question I ask. The other question I ask is that, since we're talking about wind specifically, how are we going to keep the existing operational fleet running? In truth, wind is quite a lot more mature than solar, and already we're seeing mass amount of turbines reaching end of life. And we can't have wholesale removal or decommissioning of these turbines. We need to talk about lifetime extensions, repowering, so on and so forth. What are the governments around the world doing to incentivize the maintenance of these systems to keep these equipment running and still powering the electricity grid? And I guess in the end, the other side of that is, what is the digital technology community doing to help keep these turbines operational for longer and longer lifespans? We talked about 20-year lifespans just 5 years ago. Now we're talking about 35-year lifespans. To get to that lifespan, we need good systems, and digital technology is certainly one of those systems needed to help reach lifespans.
Thank you. Well, we're going to be on the stage presenting, and I'm going to take some of these questions and ask them to the audience. So if you all are interested in following what happens at COP26, please go to relight.co. That's relight.co, and just sign up, and we'll make sure you're in the loop. And if you want to suggest questions that we put to the world while we're there, please do reach out to us directly. And